Welcome back to this Friday edition of InfoWars Nightly News. I want to thank Paul Watson for doing the news portion of the transmission this evening. I'll also be back this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. with a syndicated radio broadcast. If you don't have a local AM or FM in your area, you can simply tune into the free audio streams and video streams at Infowars.com. Now, our guest today is Professor Dr. Francis Boyle. He's got a long bio, but he's represented the government of Bosnia-Herzegovina in stopping the UN from breaking up their country. He's helped write major global U.S. bioweapons treaties. And, of course, he also has several degrees from Harvard and was given the same training in the same area as Henry Kissinger. So he's worked in close with these people. He's aware of their program, and he is a guest that we always find very informative when he comes on the radio show with us. But here he is on the Nightly News. And I wanted to get him on about the NDAA, the SOPA Act, the 30,000 drones they're funding to go in the skies, saying they're going to watch farmers with them. I mean, it is like a bad nightmare. And he studied the path to authoritarianism. And so I want to get his take historically on where he sees us going and ways to hopefully reverse this. Because along with the authoritarianism, the thugs don't just want to dominate their domestic slaves. They always look at the greener grass. They want wars, because war is the health of the state. People shut up. They do what they're told. You can have no bid contracts, and you can be big war heroes. And so now the United States, England, Europe has just been swallowed by the same type of expansionistic stuff that we saw from people like Hitler. And a lot of people, bring up Hitler. Oh, it's like Hitler. No, this really is like Hitler. Or other expansionists, Julius Caesar. I'd say Stalin, but he mainly just killed his own people and did some expansionist stuff. But it's just incredible. So he joins us to talk about that. Then I want to get into his experience with the UN up close and personal. Because some people say the UN's going to save us, and the very same military-industrial complex created it. I don't see that as the case, but we'll get Professor Boyle's take on it. Doc, it is great to have you here with us tonight. So much is going on since I talked to you a month ago. Unfortunately, everything you've written in your books warning people is coming true in spades.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, Alex. My best to your audience. Right, it looks as if we've seen the pattern here, as I said before, that after 9/11, the financial elite in America has decided to go for broke. They went to first Afghanistan, Iraq. Obama went after oil and gas in Libya. Now they are going after Syria, and it looks that will be a lead up to Iran, which could set off another world war. It's an extremely dangerous situation right now in Syria. The neoconservatives, the Straussians, have always had their eyes on Syria to knock it off. I served as legal advisor to the Syrian delegation to the Middle East peace negotiations in 1991. Now, I haven't worked for the Syrians since then, but they did ask me to draft their opening position in the peace negotiations, which would have been full peace for full withdrawal. Of course, they got nowhere with the Likud government under Shamir. But when Rabin was elected prime minister, very rapid progress was made to a comprehensive peace agreement between Israel and Syria, along the lines of the peace agreement Israel had with Egypt. So it was ready to go. And there were elections coming up in the spring of 1996, and Rabin concluded that he would present that peace treaty to the Israeli Knesset after the elections. The votes were there, but he would wait until after the elections because it was a major development. There'd be a lot of debate. And he began to run, this was late 1995, on a peace platform. He had concluded the Declaration of Principles with the Palestinians. He had a peace agreement with Jordan. he had a peace agreement in his pocket with Syria, and that then would have certainly led to a peace agreement with Lebanon. So everything could have been tied up. And then, as you know, he was murdered by his own religious fundamentalists and right-wingers over there. Netanyahu was elected prime minister, and there has been no forward progress at all since that point in time, except that the neoconservatives here in the United States have always wanted to knock off the Syrian government since then.
But they're putting Islamic, jihadi, Wahhabist types in charge now in their invasion there. The same folks they used in Libya, they're now admittedly conducting massacres and torturing the French ambassador. I mean, what's the end game after the chaos phase? I guess then rout out the al-Qaeda they put in place? I mean, this is crazy.
Well, of course, we have to understand all these al-Qaeda people go back to the CIA, including bin Laden himself. So there have been long ties with the CIA from these people going back to the original Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. So we use these fundamentalists whenever we think it is useful, as in Libya and now in Syria. And yes, the agenda in the case of Syria is simply to destabilize Syria and perhaps crack it up into its constituent units, as they did with Afghanistan, as they've done with Iraq, as they've done with Libya, and just break it up into small little pieces short of a nation state that really then cannot stand in the way of the objectives of the United States, Britain, France, Israel. Remember, France was the former colonial power here. It's ridiculous to think that they could care less about human rights in Syria. And the same way with Turkey. Before France, Turkey was a former colonial power. So they're all working together, and they're happy to use these Muslim fundamentalists. Indeed, today's Financial Times has a big story about how we are now shifting all the Muslim fundamentalists in Libya that overthrew a nationalist regime there under Gaddafi. We're now transferring them over to Syria. So it's very clear it's the same people, same agenda.
And then separately saying we've got to have 30,000 drones in the skies, highway checkpoints, TSA getting in our space, groping us because al-Qaeda is going to get us. And they're using the very al-Qaeda to commit assassinations and bombings in Iran. They just play the public like the public's totally ignorant. And I guess because the media has played along with the deception, the public is ignorant. It's just, it's so absurdist that we're told, give our rights up, al-Qaeda will get us. And al-Qaeda across the board is this clandestine CIA, Mossad, MI6 secret army, same type folks they used to overthrow Mossadegh in '53. You and I know the history, you to a greater extent in many cases than I. It's just cartoonishly obvious. Now let me raise this point since you brought this up. I was rereading for whatever reason this morning because I saw it again, exactly what that editor of that big Jewish newspaper said last month in Atlanta, where he said, you know, I've talked to Mossad people and it's being discussed killing Obama if he doesn't get behind this war. And then I'm always, and I'm not a fan of Obama, obviously, but I'm seeing this pressure. There's different camps in there. I mean, this is our president regardless. And it just, and then I was watching some other news articles out of Israel with like major right-wing rabbis saying, shut up, America, do what we say, you know, we don't care, we're going to attack, and what the editor said was great, you know, we'll do what we have to. I mean, to use the word chutzpah, there's almost like, it's crazy land, because they're trying to start World War III, the military-industrial complex, the contractors want it, but the generals don't want it. And then I get emails and calls and things, and I'm pretty much neutral on Israel. I want Israel to be peaceful and happy. I'm not anti-Israel. And I get threats now. You better shut up and get behind this traitor. I mean, it's really creepy to watch because reading what the editor said and others, it shows a level of confidence that is is frightening because it is obviously insane. And I know that's a rant. It's just that you can feel World War III. You can see it. The Russians are sending in Spetsnaz. The Iranians are sending in troops. Nuclear weapons are getting moved around. The Chinese are saying brace for war. Even in the Cold War, I've studied it. You lived it. I've never seen rhetoric like this. I mean, it's just crazy. What's your view on that rant?
Well, I think it is. It's extremely dangerous. As I discussed with you in our last interview 2 weekends ago, we sent a U.S. aircraft carrier strike force through the Straits of Hormuz and basically dared the Iranians to carry out their threat to shut the Strait of Hormuz. Fortunately, the Iranians were sensible enough not to do it. Last summer, as you know, we backed up South Korea shelling in North Korean territorial waters, even when the North Koreans had said they would retaliate. And we were fully prepared and on standby for an all-Korean war. Fortunately, the Chinese encouraged the North Koreans not to retaliate. And then under Bush, as you know, we encouraged Georgia to attack South Ossetia, knowing full well there were Russian troops there. And they were killing Russian troops with our arms, equipment, supplies, and support. And I guess they figured that Russia would not respond, but Putin did. And when Putin did respond and was about to overrun Tbilisi, the United States government under Bush basically cut away Saakashvili. And fortunately, Putin decided to stop short of Tbilisi. So there we have 3 instances recently, going back to 2008, where the tinder for a world war could have been set off. And Syria could do it too. As you know, there are Russian warships right now there in the Syrian port of Tartus to serve as a tripwire and to dissuade any type of NATO invasion or an attack. And of course, what's going on now in Iran, there are 3 aircraft carrier task forces soon off Iran, and we have 1 off of Syria.
Dr. Boyle, going back to my earlier statement and question, just specifically, to have a newspaper editor of a major Jewish newspaper say he's talking to Mossad and other Israelis and they're discussing killing Obama if he doesn't get behind an attack on Iran, that for me is pretty much an open threat and really shows the confidence of some of the Likudniks. And I've seen statements in the Washington Times that they've talked to top people and that Netanyahu knows it's going to be a big war, but that he thinks that he'll come out like Churchill, that once the West is committed to this big war, that he's going to be some type of hero. But as you said, other interest, in the United States, England, and Europe, they're moving weapon systems and ships to Asia, openly menacing. So it's not just Israel; it's the global empire, the Anglo-American establishment, whatever you want to call it, is attempting to start wider wars. But then you ask the question, okay, if you wanted one on 888, why didn't you go ahead and give the Russians the big war if you were going to go ahead and test them? So it's really frightening. Do you think Obama is being blackmailed, or do you think that may have been a threat when they said, hey, we can kill you if you don't do what we want?
Right. Whether you support Obama or not is not the issue. He is our president, and he did win a democratic election by the American people. He's legitimately in power there. And we certainly can't tolerate or support him being assassinated by anyone, especially by a foreign government. And the reason this rhetoric is so dangerous is that this was exactly the same type of rhetoric we saw in Israel before Prime Minister Rabin was assassinated to prevent the Syrian peace treaty.
The nightly news. And I wanted to get him on about the NDAA, the SOPA Act, the 30,000 drones they're funding to go in the skies, saying they're going to watch farmers with them. I mean, it is like a bad nightmare. And he studied the path to authoritarianism. And so I want to get his take historically on where he sees us going and ways to hopefully reverse this. And of course, he also has several degrees from Harvard and was given the same training in the same area as Henry Kissinger. So he's worked in close with these people. He's aware of their program, and he is a guest that we always find very informative when he comes on the radio show with us. But here he is on your area. You can simply tune into the free audio streams and video streams at Infowars.com. Now, our guest today is Professor Dr. Francis Boyle. He's had a long bio, but he's represented the government of Bosnia-Herzegovina in stopping the UN from breaking up their country. He's helped write major global U.S. bioweapons treaties. Welcome back to this Friday edition of InfoWars Nightly News. I want to thank Paul Watson for doing the news portion of the transmission this evening. I'll also be back this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. with the syndicated radio broadcast if you don't have a local AM or FM. It's because along with the authoritarianism, the thugs don't just want to dominate their domestic slaves. They always look at the greener grass. They want wars because war is the health of the state. People shut up. They do what they're told. You can have no bid contracts, and you can be big war heroes. And so now the United States, England, Europe has just been